Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much. Welcome back to Eye on Politics, and welcome to our Fort Worth studio. Nice to see you.
It's great to be with you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
So as you and I are talking and holding this conversation, the Texas Senate is going to, looks like, pass the school choice bill, the education savings account bill. And I know you've been a very big advocate of this. So what's your thought that this looks like it's going to make it to the governor's desk and he'll sign it?
Look, I think it is a tremendous victory for Texas and for every school child in Texas. School choice, I think, is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, and it's something I've been fighting for literally for 30 years. This bill that the Texas legislature is about to pass, the governor is about to sign, is going to be the biggest and the boldest and the most impactful school choice program in the entire country. It's going to provide education savings accounts of about $11,000 for nearly 100,000 school kids all across Texas. That does a couple of things. Number one, for kids that are trapped in failing schools, for kids that are having a hard time learning, that are not getting the kind of education they deserve, it gives them a lifeline. It gives them a path to use that education savings account to find a school that can teach them, that can give them the skills to succeed in life. But number two, by injecting competition into the system, this will improve the public schools. We need to be fighting for every school child in America. I think every child in Texas deserves access to an excellent education, regardless of that child's race, regardless of his or her ethnicity, regardless of their wealth, and regardless of their zip code. And this legislation is historic. I've been fighting for it a long time, and I'm really proud of the state legislature for leading on this.
As you know, Democrats have said this is going to hurt public schools.
They have, but those talking points ring empty. And listen, I mentioned I've been fighting in the school choice movement for 30 years. 30 years ago, school choice was an idea. It was an idea Milton Friedman and other free market economists had talked about it, but it hadn't been implemented. And at the time, the main argument against it that came from the teachers' union bosses was this will destroy the public schools. Now, let me be clear, Jack. If that were true, I would oppose school choice. The public schools will continue to educate the vast majority of our kids. I want the public schools to be better and stronger and do a much more effective job teaching our kids. The nice thing is 30 years have passed and school choice is no longer a theory. It has been implemented in about 30 jurisdictions across the country, and we now know the results. We know the results that for students that get a scholarship, for students who use an education savings account to go to another school, that those students end up getting better scores, better reading scores, better math scores, better high school graduation rates, better college attendance rates. It has a real impact on them. But secondly, and this is critical, we now know that not only does it not destroy the public schools, but it benefits the public schools, that we see when students have a choice that competition works, that when students can go somewhere else if the school is not meeting their needs, the school does a better job teaching those kids, making them safe, and you get much better results for the students in the public school. That's why it's such a victory for school kids across Texas.
Let's talk about tariffs. They're in the headlines a lot lately, and you've expressed concerns about them recently, saying that they could result in, quote, a bad recession and even, quote, a bloodbath. Pretty strong words. So talk to me about that.
Well, Jack, I think we face a fork in the road, and there are two different paths we can go down, one of which is very, very good, and one of which is very, very bad. The good path, I think President Trump has a moment where he's got extraordinary leverage. Leverage because of the tariffs that he's announced to negotiate and secure much lower tariffs from our trading partners around the world. There are over 130 nations who have come to the White House now saying, we want to negotiate a deal, we want to lower our tariffs. And President Trump, if he negotiates lower tariff rates with all our trading partners, that will be an historic win for Texas and for the whole country. And so I am urging him energetically, go down that road, and that would be a massive economic victory President Trump could deliver. There's another path, and the other path, and there are some in the administration who advocate this, the other path is high tariffs forever, in perpetuity, high American tariffs and high retaliatory tariffs from our trading partners. That outcome, that path would be a disaster. That would be bad for Texas. bad for America. And so what I'm urging the president is go down path number one, don't go down path number two.
And how do you think he's leaning? Because lately, even yesterday, he said it seems like he's going to retreat even on the China tariffs.
Yeah.
So what do you see is happening here? Because he has that divergence in the White House of people telling him one thing, people telling him another thing. So where does he end up on this?
So, as you know, I do a podcast every week called Verdict with Ted Cruz. I've done several podcasts that are deep dives on the tariffs. And there was one where I described that President Trump, on this issue of tariffs, he has angels and demons on his shoulders, pulling him in both directions, because there are prominent voices in his administration on both sides. So Elon Musk is one of the angels. Elon has been arguing for lower tariffs, use this to open up markets, because American companies, American producers can win all over the world if we open up markets. I'm urging the president, listen to the angels. And I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, I spent over an hour on the phone with President Trump. There were 5 other senators on the phone with me. And it was late at night, and we were urging him go down path number one. And in particular, what I urged him, I said, look, pick a country, pick any country, and negotiate a deal. Announce a deal where they slash their tariffs, we slash our tariffs. And I argued to him, look, that will, number one, calm the markets, and number two, give people confidence that we're going down path number one and not path number two. Now, that call lasted past midnight on Tuesday night 2 weeks ago. And I got to say, it was a pretty chippy call. He was arguing back. It was when you have a policy disagreement with the president, he swings back at you. I spend a lot of time with President Trump talking about this and other issues. At the end of the call, we weren't sure how it went, but 12 hours later, at noon on Wednesday, President Trump announced the pause, where he halted the tariffs on every country except for China. That was a massive victory. I saw President Trump the next night. I saw him on Thursday for a bill signing. He was signing into law legislation that I had authored, legislation benefiting cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. The Biden administration had put in place IRS rules attacking cryptocurrency, and I authored legislation repealing that. So I was in the Oval Office for the bill signing, and the president was in a fabulous mood. And I told him, I said, Mr. President, you just produced the single greatest one-day increase in the stock market in the history of the country. When he announced the pause, the stock market took off. So I'm going to do everything I can to continue to encourage him. Use the leverage you have. And to be clear, look, the president is absolutely right. There are countries all over the world that have unfair trading agreements with us. They put big tariffs on American goods, and we don't tariff their goods. That's not right, and that's not fair. Because President Trump has started with these tariffs, his negotiating style, he basically whacks you in the head with a 2x4 and then negotiates from there. And that can be very effective. The result is the president's got leverage right now we've never seen a president have on tariffs. And so my hope is 30, 60, 90 days from now, global tariff levels across the world are dramatically lower. And if that happens, that will truly be an historic economic victory.
And will that erase all of the uncertainty that we've seen and all the market volatility? Because people have lost a lot of money.
Look, I don't know if the uncertainty will be resolved. I have spent the last several weeks talking to a lot of business leaders in Texas, a lot of CEOs, a lot of small business leaders, and they're concerned. The uncertainty is a very real concern. I understand that. I'm also urging the administration, look, markets like certainty. Certainty gives those with capital a willingness to invest in capital, to build a new factory, to hire new workers. If there's uncertainty, a lot of people sit on their cash because they don't know what's going to happen. What I will say is I think the battle between the two sides on tariffs, I expect that battle within the administration to play out for some time. And so we may not have absolute clear certainty anytime soon, but I'm going to keep engaging day after day after day to say, let's go down the path to lower tariffs, lower barriers, and opening up markets around the world. Because look, Texas farmers, ranchers, small businesses, manufacturers, we can compete and beat anyone in the world if we have a fair and level playing field. And I think President Trump has a huge opportunity to produce that fair and level playing field.
Reconciliation is another big issue that you are discussing right now with House Republicans. And I'm wondering, this is the spending bill, right, that the simple majority in the Senate would have to approve. to get around the 60 vote
Right.
requirement. And so I'm wondering, how satisfied are you with the speed of this process? And I know the Senate and the House have agreed on a budget framework now, but there are some senators who want more budget cuts. Where are you within that conversation?
Well, let me start at the last part of the question. I'm certainly among those that want more budget cuts. We've got to rein in our out-of-control spending. We've got to tackle our deficit and debt because we're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. And Joe Biden and the Democrats went on a spending spree that was reckless and irresponsible. And the interest in our debt is now bigger than our entire military budget, our entire defense budget. That is dangerous. And so we need some real leadership to rein in that spending. I'm fighting to do as much of that as possible. On reconciliation, when you talk about something like budget reconciliation, that sounds like Washington gobbledygook. The one thing that is important for people to know, it's what you mentioned, is that budget reconciliation is the main exception to the Senate filibuster. The Senate filibuster is the ordinary rule that you need 60 votes to pass legislation in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans, which means you would need 7 Democrats. Here's the problem. If you're trying to cut taxes, you can't get 7 Democrats. If you're trying to secure the border, you can't get 7 Democrats. If you're trying to rebuild the military, you can't get 7 Democrats. If you're trying to unleash American energy, you can't get 7 Democrats. So we're moving through budget reconciliation. We're going to do all of that. I believe we'll get it done. November, the election was a mandate. It was a mandate from the voters. They reelected President Trump in overwhelming fashion. Of the 7 swing states, President Trump won all 7. They gave Republicans a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. In my race, as you know, my reelection was a $250 million race. It was the most expensive Senate race we've seen in the history of Texas. I was Chuck Schumer's #1 target. We ended up winning by 9 points and 1 million votes statewide. And you know what I'm most proud of? We carried Hispanics by 6 points statewide. That's unprecedented. It's never happened. The Rio Grande Valley, which has been bright blue for 100 years, we flipped the valley red. That's generational change for Texas. And now with that mandate, we've got to deliver on it. And so reconciliation, it's going to be messy. It's going to be a battle. But I'm confident we'll get it done because we owe it to the voters to deliver on what we promised.
You talked about the $36 trillion debt.
Yes.
Can the country afford the tax cuts, which could amount to $4.5 trillion, right, over a certain period of time, obviously?
Well, let me be clear. So the tax cuts, the $4.5 trillion, is just maintaining the current tax rates right now. So the $4.5 trillion is a made-up number. We have tax rates right now today, and Washington accounting says if we have the identical tax rates next year that we have right now, that somehow costs $4 trillion. That is nonsense. It's based on a fiction that the tax cuts will expire. Now, they were written into law to expire, so what was written into law is starting next year, we would have a $4 trillion tax increase. We're going to get rid of that, but not having a $4 trillion tax increase is not the same thing as a $4 trillion tax cut. And here's my view. My #1 priority is jobs. And if you want jobs, you want low taxes and low and reasonable regulations. Texas gets that. That's what we do. At the federal level, I want to see the tax cut as big and bold as possible because I want to help families, I want to help individuals, and I want to help small businesses, job creators, because the more jobs that are created, the more prosperity we have, the more people that are lifted out of poverty, and also the more revenue the federal government takes in because with a booming economy, tax revenues go up even when you bring tax rates down.
So let's talk about one other thing on the reconciliation. Last time you and I spoke, we were in your office in Washington, and it was about Texas being reimbursed by Congress, the $11 billion that Governor Abbott has requested. Is that still part of this conversation? Is that going to happen?
It's very much part of the conversation. I believe it's going to happen. I'm fighting very hard for it to happen. The Texas delegation, we are united in fighting for it to happen. Look, the governor came and met with all the Texas Republicans and laid out the case that the state of Texas has spent $11 billion securing the border. Now, that shouldn't have to be Texas's job. That's the federal government's job. And the reason Texas spent so much money securing the border is Joe Biden and the Democrats opened up the border and refused to do their job. And I think it is only reasonable that Texas should be reimbursed. Right now, the plan is to include that reimbursement in the reconciliation bill. I believe we'll get it done. Now, there are a million ways for it to slip or fall through the cracks, and so I'm going to fight to prevent that. But this bill is going to take some time, so it's going to take vigilance to keep it in there, but I'm committed to fighting and doing everything I can to keep it in there.
As you know, Senator Cornyn is being challenged by Attorney General Ken Paxton. What do you think about that?
Well, listen, I like John Cornyn and I like Ken Paxton. Both of them are friends of mine. Both of them I've worked with closely for over a decade. And so on this race, I'm staying out of it. I respect the voters of Texas. I've got to say, among my top supporters, I've got really strong supporters who are supporting John Cornyn. I've got really strong supporters who are supporting Ken Paxton. So I'm going to trust the voters to decide. And what I'm focused on is fighting for 31 million Texans. We have an opportunity right now to deliver on the promises we made to the American people in November at a level we've never seen before. And so every day what I'm focused on is rolling up my sleeves and going to work to get the job done, to secure the border, to unleash American energy and Texas oil and gas, to help small businesses create jobs, to rebuild the military, to simplify our tax code, to help continued prosperity in Texas. And so that's going to be my focus going forward.
Couple more questions, and I appreciate your time. Deportations without due process has become a very big issue, as you know, and I'm referring to the Abrego Garcia case.
Yeah.
Where do you fall on that?
Look, I believe in the rule of law. That means we should enforce our immigration laws, and I will say I think it is a very strange thing that the Democrats have decided to go all in, to make their reelection platform to be, we should have more illegal aliens and more illegal alien gang members. You look at this individual you mentioned who's been deported. Everyone concedes he's an illegal alien. He came here illegally. That means he has no entitlement to be in this country. Two different courts concluded that he was an MS-13 gang member, that he was affiliated with MS-13, which is a vicious gang. It's a gang that the federal government has determined is a terrorist organization. They rape and murder people. They engage in horrific acts of violence. And everyone also agrees that this illegal alien gang member was under an order of deportation. A court ordered him deported. Now, what happened? The Trump administration came and found him, apprehended him, and deported him. After that happened, the Trump administration realized that it had missed some paperwork, that a court decision had said he can be deported, but he should not be deported to El Salvador, which is the country he's from. He's from El Salvador. The Trump administration did not see that order until after the fact. And so they admit that was a mistake to send him to the country they were prohibited from sending him to. At this point, he is in El Salvador. And the Democrats have decided they're going to fly down to El Salvador and say, you know what America needs? More illegal immigrants and more MS-13 gang members. I got to tell you, when I hear from Texans, Texans are really happy that we finally have a president that is deporting illegal immigrants who are here, especially those who are gang members or violent criminals who have committed acts of violence. And it is one of the strangest political decisions I've ever seen when Chris Van Hollen, the Democrat from Maryland, goes down to El Salvador and has drinks with this MS-13 gang member who's got tattoos on his fingers that line up with MS-13. I got to say, you're not representing your constituents if you're fighting for more gang members in America.
And just on the broader issue, do you think that all of these people the gang members, alleged gang members who are being deported, should they have due process before they are sent out?
So, yes, but the question is what process is due. So the Supreme Court has said you can deport individuals, you can deport people who are here illegally. That they've said that the executive, the president, has enormous discretion to do so. And they said there should be some procedure that someone can challenge and say, hey, I shouldn't be subject to deportation. And so that's what the Supreme Court has ordered. The Trump administration has consistently followed Supreme Court orders. I expect that it will continue to do so. But understand, there was no process when they came here illegally. There was no process when Joe Biden and the Democrats let them go. You know, I got to say it was really striking that at the same time that Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, went down to El Salvador and was decided that this MS-13 gang member illegal alien was going to be the poster child of what Democrats stand for. At the very same time, Patty Marin is another Maryland resident. She, like this illegal immigrant, lived in Maryland. She's the mom of Rachel Marin. Rachel Marin was the beautiful mother of 5 who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant that Joe Biden and the Democrats released. He'd been in custody, they let him go, and he came and brutally raped and brutally murdered Rachel Marin. And you know what? The Democrats have nothing to say to Patty Marin, the mom of the woman murdered. At the State of the Union address, every Democrat refused to applaud for Alexis Nungary. Alexis Nungary is the mom of Jocelyn Nungary, the beautiful 12-year-old girl in Houston who was raped and murdered by 2 illegal aliens, gang members from Venezuela, released by Joe Biden and the Democrats, who raped and murdered that little girl. And I got to say, it is a strange priority, not one I understand, for national Democrats to say, we're all in for the gang members, but for the American citizens who've been violently assaulted by illegals, they won't even say their name.
Last question, and it's got to be quick, but let me ask you real quick. You recently held a hearing about locking the clock.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that, and how realistic do you think that is, where people won't have to change their clocks anymore?
So it's a fascinating issue. The hearing actually was one where I wanted to hear from the arguments on both sides. I think there's a very strong argument to stop changing our clocks twice a year. There's actually a lot of data that car accidents are caused by when you spring forward, people get less sleep, they have more car accidents, they have more depression, you have more illness, you have more heart attacks. There are actually studies that show the day after you spring forward and people get less sleep, that Monday is the day judges give the single harshest sentences of the year. And so there are real negative effects to changing the clock twice a year. I think it makes sense to lock the clock. Now, there are good arguments as to whether you should lock them on daylight savings time or standard time. And we heard arguments on both sides. What I think we'll do at the federal level is probably advance Rick Scott's bill. Rick Scott's bill from Florida would lock in daylight savings time, but then would give states the ability to opt out. In the Texas legislature, they're considering legislation to have a referendum in Texas, to have Texans decide, if we're going to lock the clock, do we want to lock it at daylight savings time or standard time? The arguments on both sides, the argument for daylight saving time, you get, for example, golf courses that really want that to happen because it gives you another hour of daylight in the evening and the afternoon for leisure. The argument for locking in standard time is the sun rises earlier. Physicians say that's healthier for you. It reduces depression. It's closer to our circadian rhythms. I think both of those arguments are really strong. So I think what makes sense is that we should lock the clock, but let the Texas voters decide.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.
Good to see you again.
You too.